Alright. Hello, my lovely friends. So, today I want to talk to you all about um, a question that comes up really frequently in the adrenal insufficiency support groups that I belong to, and that is, what is a cortisol pump? Why do you have a cortisol pump? How do you get a cortisol pump? What's the deal here? So because we get this question so frequently, I know that one of our other members has made a blog post that relates to this, and it just explains a bit about the cortisol pump. And I'm just going to do a short series of videos that basically I'm going to talk to you first about the pros and cons of using this form of medication delivery for adrenal insufficiency, and then I'll do a demonstration video that shows exactly how I mix my medication, fill the reservoir for the pump, put the pump together, attach the infusion set to my skin, and explain a little bit about how that all works in another later video. But for now, I just want to talk to you all about the cortisol pump first of all. So what is the cortisol pump? The cortisol pump is simply this. It is an insulin pump. This is a Medtronic Mini-Med Paradigm 723 insulin pump. This is a standard insulin pump. A diabetic would use this in conjunction with a continuous glucose monitor, but unfortunately, adrenal insufficiency patients, we do not have a cortisol meter yet. I know that there is at least one or two people who are in the research phase of developing that. It will be really great when they do finally come up with one. I will definitely take part in any trials gladly, and would welcome having a way to measure cortisol, because it would make adjusting my dosage with this pump much easier. So basically, that's it. This is insulin pump that, instead of having the reservoir inside filled with insulin, it is filled with medication called Solu-Cortef. Solu-Cortef is hydrocortisone suspended in sterile water, and so basically it's the medication that we use to replace our missing cortisol. So why use the pump? So the pump has some really nice advantages. One thing is that you fill your reservoir. I fill my reservoir once every 4 or 5 days, and I don't have to think about my medication dosing for a few days once I get everything set up and hooked up. So it's kind of like, unless I'm in a stressful situation where I need to take extra, really I can go about my daily life, and I've gotten used to wearing the pump. It doesn't bother me. It's like a part of me now. I joke that I'm a cyborg, but it's not actually a joke. That's kind of what it is, actually wearing a medical device. You're kind of a cyborg. So basically it's kind of a set it and forget it method of doing your medications. However, that being said, you do have to keep track of what you're doing with it. You can't just forget completely about it, because there are certain situations that could come up, and we'll talk about that more when we talk about the cons of this delivery method, and also who this type of medication delivery method might not work well for. So another pro of this type of delivery method is that you have continuous coverage. One of the issues that I had before I even got diagnosed with adrenal insufficiency, and it was actually one of the things that kind of clued my doctor into the fact that I was actually having having low cortisol, was that I would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, and my husband thought I was having nightmares. I thought I was having nightmares. My doctor that I was seeing at the time also thought I was having nightmares, but it turned out that when I switched doctors and I talked to the new doctor, he finally figured it out, was that I was actually having low cortisol in the middle of the night, and my blood sugar was dropping dangerously low into, the 30s. And when my blood sugar would get that low, I would wake screaming and in a panic. Because one of the things that happens when you have low cortisol is that your body, because you can't produce cortisol, it instead produces adrenaline, because that's what our adrenal glands actually know how to do. And so that adrenaline kicks in, and I would get this giant rush of adrenaline at around 3 o'clock in the morning every night. And so they figured out that I had adrenal insufficiency. That was one of the things that clued them in, and then finally went through the process and got diagnosed and started on medication, and I felt much better, and I was on tablets. I was just taking hydrocortisone tablets, 5 milligram tablets, and, my doctor was pretty smart, and so he had me break them down. So I was kind of doing a circadian rhythm where I would take my biggest dose in the morning, and I would take it before I got out of bed, because I couldn't function at all until, that medicine hit my system. I was a complete zombie until the medication would kick in. So I would set my alarm for 7 in the morning, and I would take, 12.5 milligrams of hydrocortisone at 7 a.m. And I would lay in bed until at least 8 or 8:30, sometimes 9 o'clock, until I felt well enough to get out of bed. I always had just the kind of sick, dizzy, woozy, nauseous, and I would get this fuzzy feeling in my arms and legs, sort of like a tingle, but like an internal shaking. And this is how I would wake up every morning, and I'm sure that a lot of you can relate, because this is basically what it's like to live without functioning adrenal glands. You don't have what your body needs to wake up properly in the morning. A lot of people who have functional adrenal glands don't realize the important role that they play in your circadian rhythm, and making you wake and sleep and all this stuff at the proper time. And so this is what was going on with me, and I would metabolize the hydrocortisone really quickly, and so I was finding myself having to break my doses down into smaller increments and taking them more frequently throughout the day. And I was still just not feeling well, and I got diagnosed while I was working on the very end of my master's thesis, and so, I started on medication right before I defended my master's thesis, and then I started my PhD program shortly after that, just a few months after that, the next fall, and I was starting to have problems in classes where I was kind of, my head would get fuzzy and I couldn't remember what I was going to say, and, I would mix up words and I would slur a little, and I'm sure that everyone thought I was drunk or I was a drug addict or something, because they would see me doing this, and then I would start popping pills in class, and I was taking hydrocortisone because I was getting low cortisol. It was like coming to the end of, my last dose. It was only lasting 2.5, maybe 3 hours tops, before I would have to dose again, and so I was having these issues. So the nice thing about the cortisol pump is that it has eliminated these problems for me, because now I have coverage that is continuous. The pump is constantly delivering, it ticks every few seconds. It delivers a tiny little puff of cortisol into my system. And the way that the pumps work, and I'll go into this in a later video where we talk about rates and dosages, and how the pump actually, the programming of the pump actually works. But suffice it to say that you can program the pump to deliver medication in a fashion that can actually mimic a normal, healthy circadian rhythm in someone who has adrenal insufficiency, which for me has been the biggest quality of life increase that any medication has ever given me. So basically, while I'm sleeping, my pump rates start to increase slowly, starting at midnight with a low dose, and then around 2:30, 3 in the morning it starts to ramp up a little bit, and then by 6:30 in the morning it reaches its highest dose, and it does that for 2 hours, and then it starts to taper down slowly over the course of the day. And this is a normal rhythm. This is what your body normally does. And so for those of you who are waking up at 3 in the morning feeling terrible, there are 2 reasons this is happening. This is because any medication that you've had in your system is probably gone at that point. So for some reason my video cut out there. I just wanted to add in just this little bit. I was mentioning that when you wake up at 3 in the morning, part of the reason is because your medication is gone, and when your medication is gone, that time of day between 2:30 and 3 o'clock is when your body would normally start ramping up its production of cortisol for your morning wake-up time. It just starts slowly, and then, you know, by the time you get to around 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, it's reaching its peak, and then after around 8 o'clock, it starts to taper down again. And so, when you're waking up at 3 in the morning and your heart is racing and you're feeling terrible, it's because you don't have any cortisol. Your body is expecting cortisol at that time of day, and because the only thing your body knows how to do is produce adrenaline, that's what it does. And so you're making a bunch of adrenaline and you're having these horrible adrenaline surges in the middle of the night. It really sucks. It's really uncomfortable. Sorry that the video is kind of like popping back and forth between this and the other one where I'm sitting in my art studio, and this is, I'm here in my living room. But I just wanted to add that back in. Alright, so I have my little handy dandy notebook here so that I remember what it was that I wanted to talk to you about. Another pro is that you can get really accurate dosing. If you watch the later videos where I show you how I mix up my medication, I explain to you how the dosing works and how the pump works. It's to deliver the dosing. But suffice it to say that you can get much more accurate dosing, because I know that we spend, you know, I used to spend like my time like trying really carefully to cut those 5 milligram tablets up into smaller chunks so that I could get the right dosage. But with the cortisol pump, you can get down to really tiny dosages. Like after 9 o'clock at night, my dosage goes down to like 0.15 milligrams per hour for a few hours, which kind of lets my cortisol levels taper off, and also which signals your body to produce melatonin, so I get a normal kind of like, you know, sleeping and tiredness response, which is helpful. So that's another one of the pros. Another pro is that this method, it's really easily adjustable for stressful situations. Like if you're going to you know, say for me, like if I'm going to defend my dissertation sometime in the next several years, I can just use what they call a temporary basal rate, where I can increase the amount of medication that is being delivered by a percentage. Like I can add 50% more medicine, so that when I'm dealing with this time of stress, I can give myself a little boost beforehand, and then I can have it delivering just a slightly higher amount of medication than normal, so that it kind of acts more like a normal adrenal gland would in that respect as well. So you're getting, you know, the extra medication when you need it, and you're not getting too much because it's really adjustable. You can give yourself just a tiny little bit, or you can give yourself a bigger amount. You know, it's not like, you know, oh, I'm just going to take 5 milligram pill because if I take, you know, half a pill it's not enough, but a full pill might be too much. And, you know, with the pills you're like up and down and up and down. You know, as your body like breaks that pill down, absorbs all the medication, your levels go really high, and so you're like overshooting the dosage that you need after you take the pill. And then when you're getting towards the tail end of the that particular pill's half-life, your dosage is probably lower than what you need. With the pump, it's much more steady, it's much more adjustable. You don't have those really high highs and those really low lows, and that can help kind of mitigate some of the bad side effects of taking steroids. And a lot of, from what I've read in research that's been done by people who actually do this kind of stuff for, you know, their academic research, you know, that kind of up and down thing, and having like your dosage so high and over the mark at some points and really low at other points is part of the reason that people end up having some of the worst side effects of steroid replacement. So this method of delivery is good for you if you have GI issues. I know there are people out there who, in addition to Addison's or adrenal insufficiency, they have Crohn's disease, or they have ulcerative colitis, or like me, I have pernicious anemia, which destroyed the cells in the lining of my stomach that produce stomach acid, and so I don't break down food properly, and I don't absorb things really well because I don't make enough stomach acid. And so for me, That's part of the reason that I wasn't absorbing enough of the medications. And then for people who are fast metabolizers of hydrocortisone, some people metabolize the medication faster, which means you clear it from your bloodstream faster than other people. This is also a good method for those kinds of people. So those are some of the really good points about it. What are the cons? Well, it is expensive. This is probably one of the biggest things. Like for me, I bought a pump used on Craigslist, my first pump, because my insurance company was unwilling to cover it, and I bought infusion sets on eBay and the ones that I could find on Amazon when they managed to sneak some on there. I would go to the Good Health Will, which is kind of like a Goodwill for healthcare supplies, that is in a town nearby, and I would get infusion sets from there at a discount price that people had donated. So I ended up spending thousands and thousands of dollars out of pocket to be able to use this method. For people who do not have that kind of income, it might be really difficult to get access. And that is part of the reason that I wanted to do this series of videos, because I figure this is good information not only for me and for you, but it might be something that you could show to your doctor so they could see that I'm a real person. And yes, I know I'm a little chubby, but I've actually lost 40 pounds in the last year and a half now, since I've gotten my pump rates adjusted properly and some other things. So yeah, the pump is a good thing, but it is expensive, and so if we can kind of start getting more doctors who are interested, get more people interested in doing research on this, get the National Institutes of Health and other governmental health agencies involved, where we can kind of maybe start to convince people that this is a viable alternative, and hopefully someday soon it will become standard of care. And so in that way we can have a better chance of having things, insurance companies cover the costs of the pumps and supplies and things for us. So it is expensive. That is a definite con. Finding a doctor who will help you with the pump is difficult. My primary care doctor works with me and with another physician who is in another state, and they communicate via email to help coordinate my care for the pump. And this was difficult. This was a difficult arrangement to find. And in fact, when I first started on the pump, I kind of went rogue because I was so miserable. I was suffering so much, and I was at the point where I thought I was going to have to drop out of my PhD program, and that really wasn't something that was acceptable for me. I didn't want to drop out of school. So, yeah. Sorry, I just had to make sure that the camera was still running because the little light wasn't on. And so, yeah, it's expensive. Getting a doctor to help you is very hard. There's starting to be a list of doctors, and if you're interested in that, I can direct you to a person who might be able to help you figure out who a doctor might be. But the first step would be to, if you have a doctor that you trust and that you do like to work with and who has done a good job of working with you on your care, it might be worth sticking with that person and just trying to slowly break them down and to work with you, because it's very difficult to find a good doctor who will help you. So that's one of the cons. There's always the risk of infection because you have a small plastic cannula or metal cannula that is constantly in your skin. You're breaking the surface of your skin. There's the risk of introducing bacteria and stuff into that, and so infection is a risk. It's the same for someone using this pump for cortisol as it would be for someone with insulin. And in fact, while there is a risk of irritation at the infusion site with the cortisol, if your rates are not adjusted properly, we see this all the time in the pumpers group, where people just start out, and when you first start out, your rates might not be adjusted ideally, and you have to do some testing and stuff, to get your rates to a better place where they work well. And once you do have your rates adjusted to a place where they work well, that makes everything in your body work better, including your immune system, and it stops freaking out as much over things like plastic cannulas and adhesives and stuff, and so you will end up eventually having less irritation. When I first started, I would get big itchy hives and welts everywhere I had the infusion set, and it was infuriatingly itchy. It was so awful. But I stuck it out, and a lot of people give up when they have this happen, and because they just don't, they can't figure out how to get their rates right or whatever, or they don't have the support that they need to get through that hump, and so, yeah, there's this risk of irritation, and it can be a really big drawback. Now, when I start having hives pop up where I have had my infusion sets recently, which is a really strange thing that actually happens if I get low on cortisol, or if my pump isn't delivering properly, I'll start to get an itchy hive in like the last maybe 3 or 4 places that I've had my infusion set. And it's like an early warning sign for me that actually I need to check my pump and change out the set. That's another thing. There's also the set can fail. The one that, like it can get jarred loose, the tape can pull, or the cannula can become kinked, and it might not be delivering medication properly, or Alright, so once again, the camera had stopped. I'm not sure what's going on. I think I need to check the settings in my camera because it seems like after like 10 minutes it stops recording for some reason. And it might be something I can adjust so for future videos. Hopefully it won't be so disjointed. So basically, I was talking about how the infusion sites can fail. This is true. They can fail, or maybe you've hit a spot where, it wasn't a good spot. You've got scar tissue there, or you've got like stretch marks or something. So one thing that you have to be aware of, and, it might not be good for you to use this method if you're not good at telling when you are actually low on cortisol. If you don't notice the early warning signs of low cortisol, whatever they might be for you, it can be a problem with this delivery method, because you need to be kind of aware when you're low, and that you need to check your site and change it right away. It's before you get to the point where you really feel terrible or you aren't able to do it for yourself, because we all know what happens when you get too low on cortisol, and we don't want to go there. Another reason that this delivery method might not be great for you would be if you are needle shy. If you don't like needles, if you're averse to being given shots or giving yourself shots, or poking yourself with a needle, this delivery method is probably not the best for you. If that's something you think you can get over, then I think it would be a really good method for most people to use. If you're not good at keeping track of, how much medication is in your reservoir, or, keeping track of your sites, because you have to rotate your sites, and there are instructions at like the diabetic forums about how to rotate your infusion sites, and best practices for that. So if you're not willing to learn these things, and you're not willing to keep track of this stuff, you might want to stick with the pills. If you can't get used to having a medical device that is attached to you all the time, there are times when it is, a problem, and it's awkward, and it's in the way, some pumps are waterproof and some aren't, and so my particular pump is not waterproof, but I do have one that is, that I could wear if I wanted to when I was in the shower, or, go swimming or whatever. But these are just some of the cons, and I hope that this video was helpful to you. And if you have questions, please post them in the comment section below the video, and I would be happy to try to answer them. I may not answer right away because honestly, I teach classes at the university, and I'm a grad student, and so I'm really busy a lot of the time, and I'm also an artist, and so I'm painting and trying to get stuff together for a show at the end of the summer, in addition to all the other stuff I'm doing. So if I don't answer right away, I apologize, but I will get to the questions as soon as I possibly can. Thank you for watching, and check back for the next video in the series, which will be, so how do I actually do the pump? Like, I'll do a video on mixing medications, filling the reservoir, priming the pump and attaching the infusion set. And so I will see you then. Thank you.